Okay, ready? Okay, welcome to this meeting of the decision session for the Executive Member for Finance and the Executive Member for Housing and Safe Neighbourhoods. I have had apologies today from Councillor Craig, who isn't feeling very well, so it's just myself here today. Item 1 on the agenda is declarations of interest. I have no interests to declare, and that takes us to item 2 on the agenda, which is public participation. And we do have one member of the public registered to speak today, Mr. Ferguson. So, Mr. Ferguson, you have approximately 3 minutes. You are the only person here, so I won't be too stringent if you're slightly over.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. It's probably only going to take about 40 seconds. So basically, we're speaking on the business rates. What I'd like to say is that I believe that sports clubs are the cornerstone of our communities and they need to be protected. And whilst business rates review will be welcomed by most leisure facilities, it's just one challenge that faces most clubs. The energy crisis and the cost of living crisis is putting extreme pressure on sports clubs and leisure facilities throughout and around our city. With swimming pools being one area or one facility in particular that's coming under extreme pressure to prevent extremely high energy bills. The New Eastwick swimming pool, for example, is trying to raise 250k with an extreme need for 50k to replace 2 boilers. My children go to the swimming pool and they absolutely adore the swimming pool, and it'll be a disaster if we lose that swimming pool because we can't get to that money. The ward profile for Huntington and New Eastwick shows that obesity in reception and in year 6 is a massive area for concern for the ward. And I would just like to know how we're going to tackle this problem as well as cutting business rates. Thank you very much.
I will declare a moderate interest now, as I was actually a member of New Eastwick Swimming Club in my youth. Until the age of about 12, I did swim for New Eastwick for many, many years. It is a wonderful facility, it's a fantastic facility. And I know I've been speaking to ward councillors and we're looking at any potential solutions that we can find to help with that one. So I fully support those issues you've raised. As we have a member of the public speaking, I'm going to item 3 on the agenda. I'll just sign the minutes and approve those. The previous meeting, and then I'll just amend the agenda slightly to move straight to item 6, the issue that the public speaker was referring to, which is the Council Tax Hardship Fund and Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Relief.
Thank you, Chair. This report actually asks you to note the 2 schemes proposed here. They have been made by officer decision previously, and the reason why the Section 151 officer, the Chief Financial Officer, was able to make that decision was because this is passporting the government's instructions on in time for the billing run once the full council decisions were made in recent weeks. So there are 2 recommendations at the beginning of the report that talk about noting those schemes. So those schemes have been approved in full, but for full transparency, they're here today. But also for you at recommendation C and D to approve the delegations there. So that's a slight change to recommendation C. So that's not to note, but to approve the delegation on the discretion to decide on qualifying and non-qualifying businesses. And there are always businesses that fall outside of some of the strict definitions for reliefs, and so that's delegated to David as the Head of Customer and Exchequer Services in consultation with the Head of Economic Development. And then the final one is to make minor changes to either scheme, delegated to the Chief Financial Officer in consultation with yourself going forward. So David's here to answer any sort of technical questions around either of those schemes. And I don't know if you want to respond, David, to the points raised by a member of the public.
Yeah, I mean, this report really reflects the continuing retail, hospitality and leisure rate relief, which was 50% last year, is up to 75% this year for small businesses in that sector, and that's the government's funding because they recompense the authority for the relief that we give on the business rates. So in reality, it tries to reflect the fact that, you know, they acknowledge that those areas are suffering as a result of the cost of living crisis. And therefore offer that relief. What it doesn't address and what doesn't come through them is things around the pool, specifically with cost of living and energy costs. You know, an inflation increase has been phenomenal over the last year or so, and therefore, you know, we can pass on the rate relief, but it's more difficult to do anything beyond that because there is no government funding other than the cap that they brought in for businesses and the cap they brought in for domestic. So in some respects, the government needs to react to some of those issues around the cost of pools specifically have been, you know, in the media, not just in York, but everywhere in terms of the pressure they're under. I think the other thing I say about sports organisations to say is that we do try and support sports organisations and try and make sure that they are registered charities or whatever else, because then they get 80% mandatory rate relief. So for non-pool sports facilities, if you are aware of any that are struggling, we do encourage people to contact us, and obviously for the last 2 years most businesses have in sport, but sometimes they don't. There's one or two we've dealt with recently where they've not been in contact with us, have not applied for the relief they're entitled to, and therefore we can, you know, provide to small sports organisations potentially point in the direction of becoming registered organisations, or allow them to escape 80% of their business rates, which is always a big support for them in terms of being able to operate. And I guess the other thing that's going on at the minute is we've got the budget coming up next week, so I suspect there will be something around support for businesses with for the public with energy, but we'll just have to wait and see what the government's going to say around that. The other thing I just touched on is also our own business teams who work. You know, it may be speaking to them in terms of getting support as well as just sort of this side's very much the tax side of it as opposed to any support for business. So it's worth discussing with those issues with them as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Just to pass on my thanks to the staff who've done this work for many years now in terms of getting this money out, which is really essential for businesses and making sure they're able to function during these difficult times. I think you took the words out of my mouth about Wednesday. I think we look forward to Wednesday giving us some positive news and fantastic amounts of support we're able to give. I suspect it probably won't in terms of that, but as we say, hopefully there will be news on Wednesday around some of the issues around the energy prices and how we deal with those, both for residents and for businesses. And I think it would be remiss of me if I never mentioned, as I always do, the council tax support was welcome. That individuals will be receiving around about £25, those who most needed to help with the increase in council tax, but we cannot continue to operate as a system that puts the pressure of funding local government and adult social care and children's services onto council taxpayers. It's not a sustainable way of the system. Hopefully, I doubt we will on Wednesday, but we can continue to push government to take a real look at how local government is properly funded. But obviously welcome the amount that's in this report and support that will give to some of the most vulnerable. So with that, obviously I'm happy to approve the recommendations on page 59, paragraph 2. As I say, Mr. Ferguson, you're welcome to stay and watch the rest of the meeting. Can you get out?
I'll
Just pause the meeting for a second.
It's difficult because we're in.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item 4, which is the recommendation for approval of grants from the Financial Inclusion Steering Group. I'll hand over first to Pauline.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is the annual grant scheme that we've run for a number of years now, and I'm pleased that being able to support this with growth funding to ensure that we can maximise the support to residents throughout this cost of living crisis. And I think you've heard me say before, we can get 5 to 6 times the value of this out into the community in terms of support to residents from a variety of different backgrounds. And they do, a lot of these organisations do reach out to some of our most isolated and excluded residents, and their work is extremely valued. The report talks about the proportion of organisations that we've funded before and those that are new. We've got a nice mix of those organisations. We couldn't fund everybody. There are those that didn't meet the criteria for the fund, and therefore awards were prioritised, and some awards have been reduced to be able to give them at least something rather than nothing going forward, because they did meet the criteria of the fund. What I would say is we're working with all the organisations that didn't meet the criteria and looking to see if we can support them to access other alternative funding. So we are supporting people as far as we can, because we can see the merit in all of the applications. So John was supporting the panel, which was made up of 3 council officers, but also an independent officer from Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So thanks to Joseph Rowntree. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think you've covered it all.
John, not David. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's it. So you're asked to approve the recommendation.
Thanks to John and his team for the work that they've done on this. I think the key one there is paragraph 8, when you're looking at the fact that we'll receive bids of £300,000 for a pot of funding, which is technically around £50,000. I think this funding has always been stretched ever since it was first allocated in terms of how we do this and the projects we get, and that was before we hit the cost of living crisis and things that happened. So it really has doubled the pressure in many ways in terms of that, and it's a small drop in the ocean in terms of what we need to do and what we are doing with the council, but it's really vitally important. And obviously we prioritised that in the budget setting process to make sure that we were able to put that additional £100,000 and to keep that at that particular level allows us to fund the projects that we see on pages 4 and 5, and really welcome those and look forward to working with those organisations going forward to deliver those particular schemes. So with that, happy to approve the recommendations again, paragraph 2, this time on page 3. Takes us through to the final agenda item, which is item 5, the financial inclusion interim strategy.
Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the work undertaken to produce the draft strategy that's in front of you. And this has been a long-term objective of the administration to review the council's approach to financial inclusion. And this has been developed over a number of years. And you can see the sort of process we went through at paragraph 8 to continue some work that we started actually before COVID, but obviously all of our efforts went into supporting our communities during COVID and then into the cost of living crisis. So this has been a bit of a slow burning piece of work, but we did a few workshops with the partnership group that were all, the members of which are described at the bottom of in the subnote at bottom of page 13, and then we took that work into the cost of living summit held at the end of October, which looked at the challenges around what we'd identified as the key themes, and as a result of that some themes were in fact added to that. We also did a cross-reference with the original 2012 Fairness Commission work and cross-reference to the recently approved 10-year strategies, and so hopefully in terms of the annex, you can see where all of the priorities have come from and how they all knit together, which they do really, really well. So the focus of the strategy is around acknowledging and in light of the continued need for city partnerships to work collectively together on this agenda to maximise joint capacity and resources. The council alone doesn't have the resources nor the singular solutions to address poverty in the city, and we will continue to work together and work hard on those solutions. The commitments that we've made through this strategy are outlined at paragraph 9. The important one is listening to people with lived experience. So this this strategy will sit alongside the Poverty Truth Commission that was launched last week, and we will continue to listen to people. There's a commitment here to continue to listen and flex what our priorities are going forward, and hopefully feeding into a future iteration of this strategy. So this is not something that's going to sit on a shelf. It's going to be something that we respond to. And our underpinning element of this and priority around this is to make sure that we always have one eye on the underlying causes of poverty, not just seeking to respond to the immediate crisis. And you will see that coming through future funding proposals around Household Support Fund, that we're trying to tackle those underlying causes as well as respond to the needs of the community. We want to make this strategy very inclusive and look at some of the barriers for inclusion, particularly around our minority and ethnic groups in the city, and also those who are digitally included, which is very much a priority for many people in the city. We want to take an all-age approach so that we're working with families in supporting them at the earliest stages of their children's lives. We want to respond to the data, and we want to continue to work on a partnership basis. So Annex A, you can see the priorities and all of those actions that we've agreed as a partnership to focus on. And those themes that were identified either by the Financial Inclusion Steering Group, CMT, or the Cost of Living Summit are identified there. And just to recap on those, it's all around food insufficiency, cost of energy, housing insecurity, debt, advice services, barriers, including reducing inequalities, digital inclusion and accessible information. And what was added from the summit was transport costs and support to businesses. So they're the key themed areas, and you will notice that in 2012, the issue of food insufficiency certainly wasn't on the agenda, cost of energy wasn't on the agenda, and certainly digital inclusion wasn't on the agenda. So this is bringing that work that was started way back then, right back into the 2020s, creating at least a strategy for the immediate future, and then working with the Poverty Truth Commission to produce a strategy that will take us into the next decade, hopefully. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Reflect on those comments you made in terms of how we deal with the causes of poverty and how we respond to poverty. And I think, as we saw the other agenda items, there is that very real need at the moment to respond rapidly to a lot of those issues, that people have the ability to get through the next few weeks, few months, the next year or so. That really is fundamentally important to doing that. But you're right, that's only a stopgap solution. While we need to do that, we really do need to get to the underlying causes of that. And I think I look positively on some things that happen in the city, and I think the place-based health partnership and the introduction of the ICS, because as you said in the paper, partnership working is fundamental to this. It's not something that the council can deal with alone. It is what are those causes of poverty, and it's the Maslow hierarchy of needs. It's all of that. It's that life cycle thing. We need to be working with health. We need to be working with housing. It's about employment, about making sure that entire life journey, people have the opportunities that they need. That's how we deal with underlying causes of poverty. And I think the opportunity that sits around that ICS and that place-based board is that we actually have all of those individuals, be that education, the health sector, the local authority, all of those key bodies are around that table with an opportunity to shape and deliver how the city goes. And hopefully, potentially with all of those budgets and all that funding that goes with it. I know we've talked endlessly as a city about how we get one public purse and things like that. I think that is the only real opportunity we have to be able to deal with this. Otherwise, if we operate in isolation, we're just chipping away at the margins. So I think with that one, I'm happy to agree the recommendations at paragraph 3 on page 11. I think I have no urgent business, so happy to declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.